Hello, in this video I'm going to show you how to make this particle, the magic bullet, in Unity. So this video will focus more on the projectile itself, and let's take a look. So here in Unity I can shoot these bullets, as you can see, and I'm going to focus on this flying particle that comes out of it. So this will be a model, and we're going to just use this in a VFX graph. That's also important to know, is that I will be using the VFX graph of Unity. So this is currently not supported in all the render pipelines, so you're gonna have to double check what pipeline you're using. So currently I'm using the HDR render pipeline, and you can also go here to Windows, the package manager, and start looking here if you have actually installed the visual graph here. So here I have installed this, and we can also here actually have even some samples. So I can recommend you also checking out other samples and other ways of creating particles to get creative. But further in this tutorial, I'm just gonna show you how to make this magic bullet effect. So to start with, I'm gonna go into Houdini and I'm gonna create this basic mesh for the bullet. So to start with, I'm gonna just type in sphere. So sphere, open this, and we're gonna set this to a polygon type. So we can see the polygons, and we're going to make sure it's actually a polygon mesh, so we have the nice loops here. Now the rows and columns, I'm going to keep this low. So I'm going to start out with a pretty low poly, like this. So I would like to now delete here this bottom, so maybe I can switch into one of the front views. So you can always go here, set view, or you can use the shortcuts you have here as well. So then I'm going to make sure I'm going to select this handle over here. Now I'm going to also press number 4 on the keyboard for primitive selection, and I'm going to select these primitives and just press delete. So now they are gone. So now I want to select the points and drag this down so we have a nice round shape here at the beginning, and then we just drag this a bit out. So I'm going to press number 2 on my keyboard so I can select these points, and then I'm going to press T, and we will now have the move handle. So I can drag this down, and if I scroll with my mouse, we can see that we will have like this soft radius. So the more that I scroll, the more influence this will get to the other vertices. So I'm just gonna scroll it maybe like this. I think that's good enough. Let's go back to perspective view. I think that's okay. You can make this longer if you want to. I think something like this is okay. Then I'm also going to already think about doing a UV, and we're going to use a UV projector. So in the UV projector, I'm going to select this handle again. And in this projector, I'm going to, instead of using the orthographic projection, which is just this plane here, I'm going to set this to a cylindrical. So it's actually a cylinder for projecting. So we can just press initialize, and it will automatically fit this to the model. So if I would go to my UV view, this is how it would look. So it's a nice UV here. And we can also use the quick shade node to view what's going on. So quick shading, and you can see that this is my result. So I see a little bit stretching here at the top. I'm not going to worry about it too much, because later I will have a texture which is like sort of like a flamey pattern. So the main detail will be here anyway. This will be like a full color with not that much detail. But you can also look into other modes. Like you can try out other modes if you want to. And you can always keep, for example, manipulating the shape. As you can see, like we can easily, with the UV projection, manipulate the shape. But I think for the moment I'm just going to use cylindrical, and I'm just going to reset this back again, and that's good enough for now. Then from here we can also do a smooth. So let's see if that helps. And in my case it's actually too much, the smooth, because I think I like maybe something around this maybe. So in case your model maybe looked like this, for example, we can see that with the smooth, we can easily like blend the shape a bit better together. So you don't have to be like, so you don't have to like do a lot of edits here. We just like smooth it out into a nice projectile shape. So I'm gonna go back here. Then maybe hide the material for now. We can also do a subdivision if you want that. So subdivide if you want some more divisions to work with, or to make it a bit more high quality. We can add some more subdivision. We can also now use this extra subdivision to, for example, rotate this model, so I can like twist it. So I have the bend node here. Let's switch to a front view, and we're gonna go all the way down here to the capture mode, so capture region. And we can also use the snapping features here. So I'm gonna enable snapping first, then capture region, and I'm gonna say from the bottom all the way to the top over here, and press enter. So now we have this capture region, and we can see that because I snapped it too much here from this point to this point, I'm gonna have to set here this a bit more manually, so clean up these values a bit more, like so. Then I'm gonna enable twisting, and we can see the handle over here, or we can just play with this value. So it can be interesting that if my texture is on, we sort of have like a twist in the UV. I think that can be interesting. So if I later have my pattern here, we sort of like have by default sort of like a twist in there. So maybe something like this is fine. Then the next thing I want to do is I want to have like sort of like a spiral going around it. So we can use the spiral from the lab tools. So spiral node. And let's change a few values in here. So first of all, the radius should be bigger. Let's try something like just 1. So it's now a perfect circle of 1. And the height should be maybe, let's do 6 for a moment. And the number of loops, we can also increase this to the amount of loops we have. So let's take around 2 or 3 maybe 2.5. Then we can also do some rotation variation. We can just leave it. And also the number of points used here is 300, so we can just reduce this to 30 or lower. So this might be made, so this is a bit easier to work with. We can also, of course, lower this part here, so maybe lower this a bit. So what I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna preview my bullet here, my projectile, and I'm gonna use a transform. And let's just set a global position, so maybe just rotate it like so. And my snapping is still on, so I'm going to disable my snapping here. And I can have it like this. Or I think maybe the height is too long, so maybe make it a bit smaller. Maybe let's keep it to 2 loops. And now I'm just going to go back into edit mode. So I'm going to press 2 to edit vertex, so points. And I'm going to also press here, you can see that my handle is this weird orientation. I'm going to press M to switch between local and world and so on. So I can just drag this here somewhere in the middle. I'm just going to scroll with my mouse again. And you can see that we can just easily influence this and sort of like bend it to where we want to. And we can also do the same here for the bottom. So I'm gonna select the last point here. I'm just gonna drag it actually down. And we can increase this if you want to. So we have like a geometry that goes like that around the bullet. Maybe we should fine tune it a little bit. Maybe just select it all and then scale this a bit like so it comes a bit out. Now after this we can actually just use the sweep node, so sweep, and in here let's just select a ribbon, which is just one slice of geometry around it, and we can reduce the amount of columns to 1. So we just have that. And we can also just change the width here. We can also do here the scale over its curve. So enable this, and we can have a ramp here, and we can do this here. So we start small, we go bigger, and we go back to small. And maybe we can just increase the width here. So we have something like this. Furthermore, we can also here go down for the rotation. So if you're not happy with the rotation, so we can tweak this here. I think that's okay. We can also do some twisting in there. We can also do a partial twist, so I think that is fine. Then we should also now think about the UV, and by default in the sweep node we have an option for UVing, so enable compute UV. When I switch to UV view, we now have this nice UV. So the one thing that I want to do here is actually do UV transform here. And in here, I'm just going to rotate the UVs like this. So as you can see, my UVs are now in a horizontal way. So I will have this styling texture that sort of like have this flame color. So the border here would just be like an alpha. So let's go back here. And with these two results, we can just simply merge this. So I have this result now. Now I can think about exporting this. Important here is that I have assigned actually a material here, and I have not assigned a material here. So since they are using the same material, I'm just going to delete the quick shade node, because otherwise we will create two material IDs when we import this model. Now a few more things to do is I want to actually transform this, and I want to rotate this in already in another axis, so like so. Because our magic bullet will like fly in that direction. Also, what can be a good idea is to use the alignment, so match size, so we can align the model automatically. So right now it's perfectly aligning into the center. But if you want your pivot point to be exactly here at the top here, we can, for example, look at the z-axis in this case. And if we set this to, for example, maximum here, we will have our pivots here exactly there. I don't think it's needed for now. I think this position is good enough. And also important is adding normals. So we can assign decent normals as well. You can also do triangulation by using the divide node. So this can be interesting if you would have a lot of n-guns. So you can just triangulate the model, or you can play around with that. You can also play around with some of these settings that can help getting you better topology when you triangulate. So interesting note here. So in this case, we actually have a lot of quads. So I don't have any issues with that. So now to export, I'm going to place down a null node. I'm going to give this a proper name like magic projectile. We can just, for example, call this 01, because maybe you want to have multiple of them. And let's use the FBX output node. And in here, we're going to just then save it into location. So this is the location of my HIP file, and then we have the model. So I choose here to look at my HIP file, then we have a folder models, and then I have my projectile bullet 1. You can also disable here the ASCII format in case you want to open this in other software. That might be useful to sometimes disable. So now we're basically ready. We can just click save, and that's it. We saved out this model. We can also still make adjustments here. So maybe this ending is still quite large here. So I can quickly go back to this edit node. I can grab here this part, and I can start tweaking this still. So again, we are working in a quite non-destructive way. We can always go back, tweak settings, and go from there. So I made my tweak. I can go back here, click save, and we saved out the new version. So that's done. Then here in Unity, let's right click, create folder for my models. And we're gonna just import these models. So here I have my model. If I drag this now in the scene, I can also notice that it is quite small. So either we can go back in Houdini and set a proper scale there and re-import this. What we can also do is we can go in here into the import settings and we can, for example, do multiply by 100. So when we apply this, we will now have a better size. So most of the time there is about 100 units in difference between Houdini and Unity or Unreal. So that's about the so that's often the main difference, 100 units there. We can also here start disabling some of the animations, like we don't have actually animations here. So we can all disable that. So now we have this. I'm going to delete this because we now are going to create a visual graph. So I'm going to right click, create, and then we're going to go to visual effects and we're going to have here our visual graph. So just magic, projectile or bullet. So then just double click and we will have this new menu. So you can just, for example, dock this here on the side, and we can here have our viewport where we see the particle as well. Normally if you just double click, you will also see a graph here. So if I drag my particle in my scene, we should be able to see this effect. So we have like these dots coming out of that. So overall this should be quite familiar with you if you already played around with other particles. So here we have our spam system, so we can do spam rate or burst. Then we have initialized particles, so we can here, for example, set a random velocity for each particle or random life. Then we have an update. So if I want to, for example, do some random rotation over time or change color over time, you can use the update for this. Then we have here our output where we can actually assign, for example, a mesh, or we can still change color or size here as well. So let's start here by going to our spam system. So for my projectile, I don't want this constant rate of spamming particles. I just want one particle flying and that's it. So we can just delete this or we can disable this. And now we can press spacebar and we can just type in burst. So I want a burst. So we have a single burst and periodic burst. Now for building this particle, I'm actually going to use a periodic burst because it will keep spamming. So let's say 1. You can see that we can just like spam all these particles. Now then I want to use the delay option and I'm also going to set this to 1. So every second I will just have these 1 burst. So again, later I will just switch this to a single burst because I just want to shoot a single particle and then let it explode. But our visualization, we just have it continuously spamming this. Now let's go here to our initialize. So here, this is the capacity. So this is the total amount of particles. So this would be the total amount of particles. Then here we have the random velocity, and I want to actually delete this. And I'm also going to delete the random lifetime. So I'm actually going to keep a consistent velocity and lifetime value, because if I later on would do the rigid body simulation of the destruction, it will always be this specific distance. So I always want the particles to fly a very specific distance. So let's use set velocity. So we can just use the normal set velocity, and let's set this to, for example, 30. You can already see like now I'm actually like shooting these particles. Then we can also do, for example, lifetime. So set lifetime. So now we have 1 second. That's quite far. So maybe let's start with 0.5 or 0.6. That's better. Maybe go with 0.5. You can always change this. Then to make this actually visually a bit more interesting, I'm already gonna go to the output and switch this to a mesh. So right now we are outputting a particle quad. So this means that we will just have like the classic quad with texture, but I want to have a mesh. So I'm gonna press spacebar, type in mesh, and then here we are gonna look for output particle mesh, and we're gonna replace the output basically. So fill in this, and you can see that we can have like multiple outputs, which is interesting with this node graph. But I don't want this, and I only want to have the mesh. So now I want to use my mesh, my 3D mesh. So I'm gonna look for this magic projectile that I made. So click on this, and now I see the magic projectile. So you can see that it's using this default particle texture. So we can fill in a custom texture. But for the moment, let's just pick something that's already here. Something like super basic, like just a flat color. I don't know if there's like just like a white or gray texture. Maybe just use this. Just for like viewing it. And now I also want to scale this up. So we can scale this. So we can set actually the scale in multiple parts. So we can set the scale in the initializer. We can set the scale under update. But I'm gonna just keep a consistent scale here and use an initialize. So you can just press spacebar. We can just type add scale. We can have some like add random scale. So every time it shoots, it's a random scale. So maybe let's do that. And we can then scale along the X, Y, and Z. Or what we can do is we can then, for example, open this. And on the side here, if I would type float, we can just have like these floats here. So we can connect this here. We can just copy paste this and connect this one over here. And let's set this to 20 and 20. So now we have like this big bullet now. Let's make a bit more room here. So let's set the scale a bit lower. Let's just keep it to 5 for now. Then in the update, I'm gonna set a rotation. So right now it's like just flying, but I also would like to rotate it because we have like the nice spiral thing around it. So under update, press spacebar, set angle, rotation. You can do here the random angle. Let's set this from -1 to maybe -10. And I think it should just be 1 and 10. I think that's the correct rotation. Maybe gonna keep the lifetime to 1 here just so you can clearly see the particle. Okay, yeah, that's definitely rotating in the correct way. So based on how the spiral is created, you're gonna have to either go negative or positive. So you can add some randomness in there, so it's less continuous. So maybe 1 to 5, something like this. We have a basic rotation here of that particle. And that was it for this video. So we created a basic mesh, and we created a base setup here in Unity with our graph to create here this shooting effect. So at the moment, it's quite a basic setup, and in future videos we're gonna improve on this and make this better. So I hope you enjoyed this, and thanks for watching.